Well, g'day everybody. Recently, social conservatives have been treated to the spectacle of Conservative Party leaders publicly stating that our position on so-called social justice issues is an impediment to electoral success. Here in Australia, in Great Britain and in the United States, the leadership of the major conservative parties have been at pains to explain that the opposition of social conservatives to issues like gay marriage, abortion or the legalisation of marijuana are not only costing us elections, but ultimately hurting the conservative movement. They talk at length about mainstreaming and big tents. What the leaders and strategists of the major conservative parties are really saying is that in order for conservative parties to succeed at the ballot box, they must become more like the progressive parties they supposedly oppose. Really? Is this what we must now come to expect from the leadership of our respective political parties? That we'll be lectured to like errant children about the principles and policies of conservative thought? That social conservatives will now be cast as the fringe element, no longer representative of the conservative movement? Well, to John McCain and his like-minded cronies in the US, to Prime Minister David Cameron and his merry band of quislings in once Great Britain, and to Malcolm Turnbull and his progressive clique in the Australian Liberal Party, who seems determined to make that party indistinguishable from the Progressive Labor Party, let me offer you a refresher course in the definition of conservatism and why it's fundamentally oppositional to the ideas and aims of the progressive left. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines conservatism as a political philosophy based on tradition and social stability, stressing established institutions and preferring gradual development to abrupt change. Specifically, it's a philosophy calling for lower taxes, limited government regulations, a strong national defence, and individual financial responsibility for personal needs. Now, these ideas are antithetical to the progressive left, and far from being a political liability, the embarrassing relative that must constantly be excused and apologised for, social conservatives are the only effective opposition, the last line in the sand, against the relentless advance of the progressive left. And what is the basis of our opposition to the agendas and policies of the progressive left? Well, put quite simply, true conservatives understand that there's no middle ground upon which progressives and conservatives can meet. Because to the progressive, there's never a point at which change must stop. There's no line in the sand, no Rubicon that must not be crossed. Change must not only be ongoing and perpetual, but most importantly, it must be incremental. And why is the incremental nature of progressive change so important? Well, the left realised very early on that revolutionary change, a sudden overturning of the social order in countries such as the United States, Australia and Great Britain, was impossible. The very success of free market capitalism, our relative affluence and our Judeo-Christian morality precluded the sort of revolutionary language and strategies that had worked so well in places like China, Russia and the Latin American countries. The left realised that the only way that they could, to borrow a phrase from Barack Obama, fundamentally transform our countries was through a process of incrementalism or gradualism. And the focus of this strategy would no longer be class, but our cultures. Now, little by little, year after year, progressives have chipped away at our social structures, picking apart the once tightly woven strands of our social fabric until the whole thing, they hope, comes apart. And this is done by deliberately using language in the most duplicitous way. The left have hijacked for their own purposes the ideas of social justice and equality. All policies, all debate are framed through this distorting lens. And this is entirely deliberate. After all, the left have reasoned, who can argue that justice and equality are a bad thing. From the 1960s onwards, the progressive left have worked tirelessly to undermine our cultural institutions And it's this aspect of continual social change, of immoral policies being presented as moral imperatives, that fuels much of the social conservatives' opposition to the progressive agenda. And it's the inability of the leaders of conservative parties to understand this that is so worrying. Because if we accept that the aim of social progressive policy is to fundamentally transform our societies, then the question that naturally follows is, what is the cost to our societies if we allow progressive policies to go through unchallenged and unchecked? Well, the gradual nature of the process sometimes makes it hard to ascertain the cost to our societies that these changes incur. However, we do have certain yardsticks, points in time from which we can see where we were as a society to where we are today. Now, one such yardstick is our education systems. America, which has been the primary focus of much of the progressive left's attention, offers a clear insight into the nature and results of incremental social change. A widely cited study from the 1940s showed the major concerns of teachers regarding schoolroom discipline. The top 5 concerns of teachers in the 1940s were talking out of turn, chewing gum, making noise in class, running in the halls, and littering. Now, compare those concerns with this list from a similar study undertaken in 2008. Drug abuse, pregnancy, suicide, weapons, and assault. So, how did we go from chewing gum in class to carrying weapons in the space of one human lifetime? Well, like so many of these things, it happened incrementally. One progressive reform, one conservative capitulation at a time. Discipline was deemed oppressive. The rights of students was made paramount, and in the name of empowerment, teachers were disempowered. And the irony behind this tale of progressive failure, this dog's breakfast of failed social engineering, is that it was all done under the banner of the progressive concern for the welfare of the children. Why is it that so often the victims of progressive policies are the very people that these programs purport to protect? Why have progressive policies like that pushed through for, say, black Americans been so disastrous for those black communities? Well, quite simply, because the stated desire, the public position of the progressive left for social justice and equality is a lie. The left aren't concerned with the welfare of children or the success of black Americans. If that was true, they would acknowledge the failure, the unintended consequences that these policies have engendered. No. The progressive stated aim of equality and social justice is merely the moral camouflage that the left don to hide their true intent. To break down the accepted societal norms and to armour themselves in what Bill Whittle describes as unearned moral superiority, which allows the left to shield themselves from criticism, but also allows them to attack conservatives for their opposition to these disastrous policies. If in the case outlined before, that of education, progressives were truly concerned with the welfare of children, one question must be asked of the progressive left and the leaders of the conservative parties that wish to become more like them. Why is this child of the 1940s more deserving of a safe learning environment than this child in the year 2008? I'd love to hear their answer to that.